are live. Welcome everyone to the conversation series of In the Spirit of Things. I'm delighted to welcome you to our occasional chat series. This time we're talking older people in a COVID-19 world. Joining me tonight, I have with me Jane Barrett, who's the Secretary General of the International Federation of Aging. I have also with me Ilse Hampton, I beg your pardon, Ilse, who is the CEO of Meaningful Aging Australia, and Beverly Baker, who is the president of the Older Women's Network. So we might just start with Jane, if you could perhaps give us an international perspective on aging and perhaps even lead into the decade of healthy aging and what we're supposed to be celebrating this year.
Oh goodness, that's a very big topic that probably could take days and days and days. But let me just thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important session today. I'm coming from Toronto, Canada, and my role as the Secretary General of the IFA is to be a point of connection of experts and expertise to influence and shape policy. I'll just make one or two points to open the conversation. First and foremost, older people are not a homogeneous group. And so when we talk about older people and population aging, we need to really consider, the unique nature of every individual and also the unique nature of the environment in which they're living. We now talk about healthy aging versus active or positive or celebrating aging. And what we really mean by that, perhaps other people could mute their, Kathy? Okay. And what we really mean by that is maintaining and improving the functional ability of a person to enable them to do what they truly value. And with that phrase, we can really talk about older people in many different settings. This year in particular, 2020, the WHO will hopefully be launching the Decade of Healthy Aging. And there's 4 key action areas. The first is about the way we think, feel and act around aging, which is really ageism and age discrimination. The second is around long-term care. There is a strong belief that every single country in the world should have a system of long-term care. The third is primary integrated care. And by that, we really mean that, an older person can be confident and comfortable, that the integrated, that there is an integration across primary, acute and tertiary care. And finally, age-friendly cities and communities. And we know that that's growing at a rapid rate. So that's the decade. Let me then just touch on where we are today. There wouldn't be many people in the world that would not have a preoccupation and almost an obsession about the coronavirus. From a professional perspective, I wake up in the morning thinking about it and I go to sleep thinking about it. And I do that on a personal level because my mum is 92, living in Perth, Western Australia, but also because we have an intimate relationship with the World Health Organization and the United Nations. So we are constantly informing technical guidelines. We are being part of international conversations, but we're also being part of the storytelling. Stories in this time of pandemic are critical because they give meaning to the lives of people that we've lost, but they give meaning to the lives of people that are fighting on the front lines or are just trying to live through this pandemic. And so stories are really a very important part because they really enable other people to have a deeper understanding of what we're dealing with. So Kathy, I'll leave it there and let other people introduce, and then I'll come back and part of the conversation.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Ilse, perhaps you would talk about Meaningful Australia and your role in policy here in Australia.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and great to meet you, Jane and Beverly. Meaningful Ageing Australia is a membership-based not-for-profit organisation. Our members are organisations and groups that are supporting older people. We're a registered charity and we're the peak body for spiritual care and ageing. And when I say spiritual, often that can trigger a whole lot of things for people. We're working with the broad understanding of spirituality as being around meaning, purpose and connectedness in people's lives. And then connectedness with some particular domains that come up in the international literature. So that's connection with self, connection with others, connection with creativity, connection with nature, and connection with some sense of something beyond yourself. There's an Australian researcher, Julie Fletcher, whose work we use, and she talks about something bigger, which I think is a really good one for Australia. A lot of people aren't that comfortable talking about sort of faith or religion or spirituality, and so we like that kind of label of something bigger. So of course this is expressed in lots and lots of different ways by people, and there'll be different emphases depending on their background, their culture and their beliefs. So for some people it does have a religious expression, and for other people it doesn't, and it absolutely speaks to the nuance of our humanity as well as the commonality of our humanity. So that's what we're really focused on, because there's quite a lot of evidence around about how people's spirituality can be a source of resilience and hope, and the thing that sustains people in difficult times, and especially as people age, it can often become more important for them. So we mainly produce practical resources. So spirituality can be associated with, I guess, things that are quite ephemeral. So we're making the ephemeral practical. We make practical resources to help organisations understand and respond to the spirituality of older people. And those resources come in lots of shapes and sizes and forms for different parts of the care system. We also do advocacy with government and key agencies around trying to help them understand spirituality and what it means in people's lives, and to ultimately have it integrated into care systems and appropriately funded. And then we also do some workshops and events, and I speak at conferences and now increasingly speak at Zoom things. So that's our work. We've got 117 organisations that we're working with now. So and they're mainly aged care service providers, community and residential aged care. So in terms of aged care in Australia, that's not a lot of organisations, but you know, we've been growing just steadily over the years. So it seems that we are starting to get the word out. And one of the pieces of work that was quite significant for us was the new aged care quality standards that came into effect on the 1st of July last year, which are much more holistic, and we certainly put in a lot of energy into influence where we could around those. And of course, working in collaboration and partnership with a lot of other people. We're never sort of doing these things in isolation.
So can I just ask, what are some of the practical ways you're helping people to understand meaningful ageing in Australia?
Sure. So in terms of the service provider resources, we have things like an intergenerational reminiscence program. So we've published the guide for how to run a successful program connecting with younger people. It has a particular structure around it that relates to that, giving people a sense of elderhood, and there's a few sort of milestones in there. Or there's Connect 2, which is a spiritual screening tool, is the sort of technical name for it. If people can learn how to use that, it helps staff have an introductory spiritual conversation with people, but also then that can feed into goal setting and care planning with people, so that the organisation's getting a more nuanced understanding of what's important to someone, and then that is being incorporated into really hopefully everything that then happens with that person. Or there's national guidelines for spiritual care and aged care that were funded by the Commonwealth through a grant a few years ago. So they've got 50 outcomes and actions, and that's really the benchmark. And so then one of the things we're doing is producing practical guidance to help leaders and managers sort of make those guidelines come to life in their own organisations. So we'll go back over the evidence and unpack a few things, and we'll also get examples from service providers so that they can see how to make it real, I guess, at the local level. We're working on an app for personal carers We've got quite a lot of things. I'll just mention one other thing at the moment, which is our community-facing campaign. So that's called See Me, Know Me, and it really is speaking to what Jane was saying around, you know, older people being unique. You know, they're people, as we all are. And one of the great frustrations for people is that they're treated like a homogenous sort of group, as it would be for any of us. And so our See Me, Know Me campaign is really speaking to that, really promoting the idea that people all have a story and they have things that they're passionate about and that really matter to them and that sustain them. So wanting to really help older people feel more empowered. And then if they need a service provider, See Me, Know Me is about also equipping them so that if they need aged care, they can find service providers that are investing more in this holistic support.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Beverly, perhaps you would share with us, because you're really at the grassroots level, a little bit about the Older Women's Network, where, you know, the genesis and what you actually now do these days, and even your advocacy work.
Okay, certainly. The Older Women's Network grew out of the Superannuates and Pensioners Association when we realised that women are impacted differently to the predominantly that was the breadwinner male in terms of superannuation and what was needed. So we set up a small group to look at the particular needs of women. Out of that grew this amazing difference where we realised that women are impacted across the board, not only in terms of superannuation, which are much less superannuation, but also in terms of isolation, loneliness, being viewed as being a mob, a group, you know, silly old women, the diversity, the range. And so we've then moved into the space of looking at ways in which we can engage women, we can empower women, we can understand what's going on in their lives, and then advocate on their behalf so that we can pull this stuff together. One of the first organisations, I think, to respond to the Aged Care Royal Commission, when we realised that more women are in aged care facilities than men are in aged facilities. So that therefore the impact of all of the abuse that we were seeing going on there impacted on women far more than it did men. We were then horrified to discover that women are the fastest growing demography for homelessness. So in spite of the fact that women are behind men in every other issue, the one area in which we're catching up fast is in homelessness, which isn't a good look for Australia. We recognise and build on the diversity of our members. We look at what they want to do, and then we respond to what they want, and we try to work on that. Because we're more like the canary in the coal mines situation, we work on the view that if we have one person telling us something's happening, that's interesting. If we have two people, that might be coincidence. But if three people are telling us the same story, we know we have an underlying problem that we now need to see if we can address and deal with. The difficulty for our organisation is that we are a charity and we operate out of a government grant, which then means that our ability to critique and criticise and to actually advocate against government policy is extremely difficult. That doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We try to do it in the most cooperative and respectful way. But the issues that are facing the elderly or the aged or the older people in Australia today are fairly horrific when you think that there is a 4-year waiting list to get home care. If you're allocated a level 4 home care, which is the top level package, you're told you could wait for 2 years for that. By then you're dead. You don't need it anymore. So it's really looking at that impact. We recognise that out of the Royal Commission came the fact that older women were complaining of sexual abuse and being ignored. And we have now asked the Royal Commission to investigate the sexual abuse of older women in these institutions that families put them because they believe that they're going to be safe. And so we're working with that, with our Aged Care Commission to actually go and investigate that, because we think that this is going to be as big an issue as the child sexual abuse issue has been in another place. And we think that this is a continuing issue, and we keep investigating and listening and respecting to what women are saying, and then trying to work out how we can bring them together. at a grassroots level, we offer programs that women want to do. So we've got from everything from jazzercise through to book club. And you can come in, or now we are moving to online because of COVID. You can't come in to do these activities. And what has come out of that has been this enormous understanding that there's a whole pile of women who are not comfortable going into public spaces to do exercises, but they are comfortable online doing them in their own home where they can do them and not be embarrassed. And that's again thrown up a whole pile of issues for us that we now are going to look at. And we do this on a shoestring. We don't get very much money at all. And I have 2 staff, and they honestly, if they were sainthoods going out, I'd be nailing them. They would be getting sainthoods. They are just fantastic human beings.
Thanks, Beverly.
Basically, if there's anything on that deals with older women, we're in there.
So on that note, I might just chunk it up again to a global level and ask Jane, the intersectionality of issues that affect older people, not just women. I know working with WHO and the United Nations, if you were to name the, say, top 3 intersectional issues, what that impacts older people globally, what would they be, and why aren't we solving them?
Oh, look, look, let me first just mention, you know, who the International Federation on Aging is. I think that may help put what I'm saying in a bit of context, because I do want to keep threading through where we're sitting at the moment, which is a global pandemic. I think it's very important for us to actually talk about that in the context of who we are. So the International Federation on Aging is an international NGO that has formal relations with the WHO and general consultative status with the United Nations. We're a membership-based organisation also. We have members who are government, non-government, academia, industry, and older people, because together they influence policy. And I was struck by both of Ilse and Beverly, you know, in the theme that I heard, which was partnerships, relationships, and reaching out, because that's what we do as IFA. We don't have all the answers. We know some of the issues, but it's about the collaboration and partnership across sectors and across disciplines. And it's this across kind of conversation that is so critical. You know, the 3 top issues, if we were not in COVID times, ageism. You know, clearly, you know, ageism is a barrier through which we look at older people. And I'll talk a little bit more about ageism and COVID, which is I think a complex conversation. You know, there's no question that long-term care is another big ticket item, right? But then on the positive side, you know, the healthy life expectancy of older people globally is increasing. And so we actually have to really balance our conversation. How do we create an environment that enables older people to do what they value? And Beverly mentioned, you know, exercise in the home, but also Ilse, you know, mentioned see me, know me. You know, so these are ways of connecting and giving meaning to the life of a person who may have dementia, but may be able to live within the community, because the community builds a bubble around that person. So our work is very much around ageism, long-term care, primary care, but creating this environment that maintains and improves the function of an older person. But let me just give you an example, Kathy, about older people and COVID. So in most rich countries, developed countries today, you know, the mantra is test, isolate, trace. We're hearing it in Australia, we hear it, you know, in Canada, and social distancing. This is the new norm, the social distancing. And that seems fine and good until you're in a low resource country. So we know that 10 to 12 people are living in a tin hut in India that's 10 by 10. So we actually have to go, well, there's no water, there is no soap, there is little food. And then we have to think about those and come back to our own country where we are and go, who are the most vulnerable in our country? You know, it could be older migrants, older refugees, older women, older prisoners, older LGBT people. You know, so these are people in marginalised groups that have layers of discrimination. And that is where we understand intersectionality, because fundamentally we are dealing with inequity, you know, at the greatest global level ever in our society. And so that's the conversation that Australians need to be having, as well as Canadians, as well as those in low middle income countries.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Did you want to say something, Beverly?
I was just saying I absolutely agree. It's a conversation that should be had. The thing that's appalled me the most out of this is the idea that older people are somehow disposable. You know, we started off with both Australia, USA and England saying, well, it only affects old people, so we'll go for herd immunity, with no knowledge of the disease at all, no knowledge of how it may work. Is it herpes that never leaves your system? It stays there forever and keeps coming back. There's no guarantee that there's a herd immunity to it, but we were prepared to say, well, because it was just going to kill off old people, worth the risk. The Prime Minister of Canada has come out and said, under no circumstances that is a risk. Trump is now calling people to go out into the streets, which is going to put their older people at risk. And Australia has backed off a bit, but there's been no positive statements that says older people are not expendable. And that's and they're the three leaders of the world. They're not coming out and saying or setting the ground rules, even for other countries to start looking at the poor. We're not funding through this. We're not looking at our refugees. We're not funding people who are part-time workers, people who work casual workers. We're not looking after those people. They don't matter. And they are the poorest in our society. And that is appalling for this country to be talking. So I think that, and that's the world over, then if we're leaders.
No, no, look, I hear your passion and your determination and that voice of an activist, and that's who you are, and that's how it should be. But let me just peel back this whole sort of surprise and shock and around. It's not only older people, it's vulnerable people also. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to stretch our understanding. There is, and I as an Australian, I can say I'm fairly proud of where Australia is at the moment in terms of containing, you know, the pandemic. It's containing, and particularly proud of Western Australia. And you might also look at New Zealand, tremendous leadership, right? You know, but we also have to remember that pandemics have been with us before, but the globe hasn't been involved. We've had the HIV/AIDS pandemic, Ebola pandemic, SARS pandemic. And so this is an unusual situation because the speed of contagion is something that we've never seen before. But let me reassure you that you have some of the finest global ethicists and scientists in pandemic management in the world, right? So
I absolutely agree. I accept that completely.
And Australia has them. So let me explain how I'm viewing this at the moment. There's no question that older people and those vulnerable, you know, are are impacted most. You're right, Beverly. You know, we're still learning about this coronavirus. One of the reasons that we're in lockdown is because our healthcare systems are inadequate, broken, sometimes absent, and they will not be able to be responsive to millions of people needing intense treatment. And so the reason that we're socially isolating and distancing is